Sindhu, as we consider the job scope opportunities for people in Canada, which kind of careers tend to struggle and which careers are thriving in Canada right now?
I would say if somebody is planning to move to Canada, it makes sense to check if you and your career will need to be licensed here in Canada. Canada does struggle with careers that need that kind of licensing, and transferring licenses are a struggle because you have to do that extra studying and that extra license transferring. So, things like being a pharmacist, architects, nursing, medicine, these are the kinds of careers that you will struggle to transfer over and easily integrate into the workforce. But if you're an engineer, if you're somebody in software and IT, all of those kinds of fields, you will have no trouble integrating into the workforce, right? But it's worth also considering that careers is one side, but the people who thrive in Canada, right? So picking the right country, Canada is not for everyone, I will say that. And it is also related to this question because if your primary goal is to earn and save and you have family obligations and commitments, then Canada is probably not for you. And actually, for that matter, neither is the US. A country like Dubai is probably appropriate because you don't pay taxes, income is, and salaries are really high. So choose that country appropriately. But on the other hand, if you're the kind of person that values the kind of freedom that comes with permanent residency, the ability to explore a lot of different things, then that's the kind of person that should choose to come to Canada. So it's worthwhile trying to ask yourself what your why is, why it is you want to immigrate, what it is you're looking for, and choosing that country appropriately.
Friends, if you want to learn more about the pros and cons of Canada, stay tuned. Hey friends, welcome to Chine Coaching. I'm Rob, and at Chine Coaching, we're all about helping you to thrive and succeed in your cross-cultural journey. We talk about study abroad, job search, immigration, and today our fun focus is Canada, the way that the US immigration works, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. People need to consider Canada. Sometimes people want to go directly to Canada. Great universities, job opportunities. So we're asking the question, is Canada the place where careers go to die? Or is there something else going on there? We've got our guest Sindhu to help us understand this better. Sindhu, welcome and introduce yourself.
Hi, Rob. Thank you for having me. So, about Canada. I moved to Canada in 2021 after having spent 9 years in the US getting a master's degree. I moved to the US in 2021. My master's is in molecular and cell biology. I have worked in the US. I moved to Canada because of immigration issues in the US, and I was seeking immigration freedom and all of the opportunities that come with it. And I'm now in Canada. I've been here, like I said, since 2021. Really, really appreciate and taking advantage of the immigration freedom I have here, and I really enjoy it.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited to learn more. One thing you mentioned is freedom, and an interesting part of pursuing a career in Canada is the PR. So tell us, what does it mean for having freedom with permanent residency working there in Canada?
An interesting aspect of Canadian immigration is that it's built around the individual and their skills. US immigration is built around the employer and their sponsorship of skilled immigrants. In Canada, to apply for PR, you do not need employer sponsorship in most cases. So you basically have no reliance on the employer other than them providing sort of a letter of experience kind of thing, right? You can decide what pathway to apply for PR, when to apply for it, who to work with to apply for it, or to apply for it directly yourself. Even that is an option. You can just apply directly yourself. So that kind of agency on your immigration application and your immigration future really does make things much less stressful and does not behold you to the employer in a way that the US immigration system does. And I think that's a major advantage of the Canadian system, that it's built around the individual and not around the employer.
Definitely, definitely. And for someone coming in new or fresh or maybe pivoting from America, how long does that PR process look like?
It really depends because Canada has a merit-based system. So since demand is relatively high right now, they might have to consider coming in with a work permit, working and gaining some Canadian experience, and then applying for PR. The PR process itself, once you are invited to apply for permanent residency, having cleared that threshold, is relatively quick. It's around 6 to 8 to maximum 12 months, is what I'm hearing right now. So it's not that delayed. Canada does not do country quotas, so it really doesn't matter where you were born. None of that. Country quotas are not a thing here. So as long as you get your application in and you're invited to apply, that's the hurdle. Did you get enough points to be invited to apply for permanent residence?
But yeah, once you get there, it seems like a pretty quick process.
Not necessarily. So, for example, the people who are finding it difficult to make it to PR are the people who come in with no work experience. So, if you come in as a student here directly with no prior work experience, you are likely to struggle. So, for people who are already in the US and have been working there and maybe did not get an H1B and are fairly young, and move over to Canada, they actually have still a fairly decent shot.
Okay. Well, that's a great clarification to know. Kind of where you're starting out impacts that journey to PR.
Very much so. A quick, very helpful tip for people is use what's called the CRS score calculator. Fill out that questionnaire, it'll give you a score, and then match that up against the prevailing scores to see where you stand. A lot of people get into the express entry system directly, thinking that, okay, let's make a bid for PR. Don't do that without finding out your score and seeing where you are relative to the prevailing cutoffs.
Okay. And what was that? The CRS score? Or what did you say that was called?
The CRS score calculator. It's basically sort of like a mortgage calculator, right? But it's something that the Canadian government puts out.
Great. Well, yeah, we'll put a link in the video description for you guys to check that out and access that easily. Are you worried about your work visa status in America? It's time to stop. Whether you've been laid off, your OPT status is about to run out, or you didn't get picked up in the H-1B lottery, you've got options. Syndesus is a Chine coaching partner which can help you pivot and prevent you from an unplanned move back home. Syndesus can help move your remote US job to Canada and also help you get PR and citizenship much quicker there in Canada. Syndesus also leverages Canada's global talent stream to connect top talent with companies who are ready to hire. Check out Syndesus for your visa and career solutions today with the links above and below. They're amazing. My friends, if you're loving this video, learning a lot, hit that like button to say thanks and cheers to Sindhu for helping out. And the chai question I want to ask you guys who are watching is, would you consider Canada? Are you considering Canada for studying abroad, for a career and job? Are you hoping to maybe even get PR someday in Canada? Let us know in the comments. Would you consider Canada? What are you considering Canada for? We'd love to hear from the audience. Tell us in the comments what you guys are thinking about Canada and a future there. So Sindhu, let's pivot. One pathway is kind of going the PR in Canada, and then down south in the States, it's more about pursuing the green card. I've heard ridiculous numbers for green card wait times, backlogs, even up to 100 years or something like that crazy. But now, is it completely impossible to get a green card? What does that look like? And what do people need to know about that as they consider their immigration futures here in North America?
An important thing to know is that how quickly you can get to a green card in the US depends on where you were born. So the way the US does green cards is that, let's think about it like a farmer's market, right? There's too many people who want apples and there are too few apples, right? So there are many ways you can do this. You can just limit the number of apples each person can take, right? That's sort of what the US has done. It has limited the number of green cards each country can get based on the number of people born in that country, yeah? But the trouble is, all countries don't have the same population, right?
There's a couple countries out there with over 1 billion people in there.
Right, like half the world lives in India and China. But India and China have the same quota as countries like the UK or even Singapore, which is basically a city, right, masquerading as a state. So that's the problem. Because of this, countries like India and China and in some cases Mexico and the Philippines, who have big influxes to the US, tend to have long backlogs. Yeah, makes sense? So because of this, the latest calculation is that accounting for death and attrition and all of that, it would take 54 years to clear the backlog for India in the most popular category. of application, which is the most common one that people use. So, for Indian born candidates, if you do nothing special, it's basically impossible to get a green card right now if nothing changes. So, you're basically looking at a lifelong visa situation. Now, that doesn't sound very bad at the outset, but the system is not designed for a lifelong visa situation like Dubai is. So, for example, in Dubai, your visa renewals are very easy because their system is designed for that. Here, it's kind of like a band aid solution, right? So, visa renewals happen every 3 years, they're very slow. During that process, you can't, in some states, renew your driver's license. So, there's a lot of friction in the system. So, for people who understand this, please don't come here thinking, okay, fine, that's okay, I'll just live my life on a visa. It is not that simple. Once you put in an application, you cannot leave the US. I mean, I guess you can leave, but you can't come back. That's the more accurate thing to say. So please keep in mind there's a lot of friction in the system, and you can't just shrug your shoulders and say, okay, well, I'll just live the visa life. It's not that easy. It's very stressful. I should add that while you're on that visa, there are significant limitations to what you can do even while you're in the US. You can't change your field. There are significant hurdles to changing your job. If you lose your job, no matter how long you've been here, you get 60 days to change your job and transfer your visa, or else you're kicked out. No matter how long you've been here, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it doesn't matter. If you're stuck in a not great job, then that's a difficulty. There's a great barrier to moving to a different job. Also, not all jobs sponsor visas. So, all of those job openings that you see, many of them will not accept applications from immigrants because they don't sponsor visas. All in all, what you should take away from this is that when you're on a visa, you are losing a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of barriers in your way to building the career and the life that you aspire to in the US. I think the idea that most people have when they come to the US is to come to a land of opportunity and freedom. That true realization of opportunity and freedom will only come with permanent residence. With a visa, that vision is much more diminished.
Yeah. I know one thing that people maybe get limited on, even the kind of companies they can work with. If they need that visa, it's considering the big companies that can have the money, the lawyers, the resources, or if you want to be more in the startup incubator culture, and maybe you're going to miss out because it's harder to get a visa in those kind of startup companies.
Yeah, another thing worth considering is even if your startup is willing to sponsor you, the immigration agency may be skeptical of your employer, right? So there's two hurdles there. Your employer has to be willing to sponsor you, and if they're a small employer, the immigration agency might be skeptical of your application. And so immigrants play it very, very safe when they're in the US. That's why you hear of all these immigrants working for Amazon and Apple and Google's, because it's actually a little bit risky to work in smaller, lesser heard of companies.
Well, Sindhu, you've shared a lot of interesting comparisons between Canada and America and careers in Canada. So, Sindhu, what would be your answer about, is it worth pursuing a career in Canada?
I would say if you feel like immigration is a significant barrier to your life and your career, you should consider Canada for many reasons. Canada is unique in its relationship with the US. No other country has that kind of close tie with the US, and you benefit from being in Canada and its access to the US market. You can stay in Canada and work for your existing company if remote work is an option. It's hard to do that in any other country. You can stay in Canada and invest in the US market with total ease. It's hard to do that with other countries. A lot of American companies are listed in the Toronto Stock Exchange, right? So these kinds of deep relationships between these two countries really benefit you when you're living in Canada. And let's say your ultimate goal is to move to the US. After you acquire Canadian citizenship, you become eligible for a TN visa, which is a special visa through the free trade agreement between Canada, the US, and Mexico. Nobody else is eligible for that other than the nationals of Canada, US, and Mexico. Important caveat: becoming a Canadian citizen does not exempt you from the green card backlog, because that is in relation to your country of birth, not your country of citizenship. But still, you can work in the US on a TN visa, which is much easier to deal with because there are no caps. There are many advantages to being in Canada. There are, of course, certain disadvantages. Canada famously has an affordability issue. Housing prices are very high and things like that. But if you're somebody who values and is able to prioritize freedom and wants to access the mental peace and stability that comes with it, I recommend it.
Don't forget to check out Syndesus for the remote jobs in Canada and see if you qualify for their special career paths. You might be the exact employee that they're looking for. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for kind of giving us that summary. My friends, we've made another video with Sindhu where she actually shares her journey of kind of how and why she pivoted and went from America to then taking her career to Canada. So check that out. Learn more about her process, her decisions, the things that she faced, and it might be similar to what you're going with right now. But Sindhu, thank you so much. This was awesome. I learned a lot. This was a great breakdown comparing the big points between US and Canada. I know is going to help a lot of people. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This was lovely.
Awesome. And my friends, again, connect with us online on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn. Sindhu has an amazing newsletter about immigration for immigrants. Make sure you check that out. We'll have a link for it. Make sure you also subscribe to our Chai and Coaching e-newsletter as well. We love having you all be part of our community here at Chai and Coaching. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Cheers, everybody.